All right. Notre Dame fans, we are back with another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Vince Adaro, the football analyst at irishbreakdown.com. I'm Brian Driscoll. Y'all know us. That's the OG right there with me. And Vince, we are going to talk about we're going to put the finishing touches on the Notre Dame Stanford game.
Because I definitely don't want to talk about it much more after this.
That's right. I know, right? I literally don't want to talk about this game after tonight. So the reason for the late start is we've been trying to get StreamYard fixed to allow us to show the clips, and it's not. So we will not be showing clips tonight, but there's still going to be a lot we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of offense tonight. We're going to talk about some defense because the defense is not blameless by any stretch of the imagination.
Nope.
We're going to talk a lot about the offense, just kind of what we thought went wrong against Stanford, and then also how some of the stuff against Stanford was indicative events of bigger picture problems.
Yes,
that exist for this offensive football team, and just why we felt that they had the issues that they had. Some of it was coaching, some of it was like Marcus Freeman has used the word execution in his last two interviews about 40 times.
Yeah,
and there's some truth to that, right? I mean, it is an execution problem, but my issue is the manner in which it's discussed. We'll talk a little bit about that. You guys, I know, talked a lot about that in your previous show. We're going to talk about it relative to the Stanford game, so we're going to try to keep it about Stanford and then how that, what that impacts and how that impacts other things. So that's what we're going to discuss today, Vince. And I think the first thing, that I want to talk about is just the reason we're going to talk about the offense is the defense did not play well. It didn't. The defense didn't play well, but the defense gave up 16 points, right? And yes, your offense scored to give you a lead and the defense gave it right back. I get that. But did you really think that 14 points was going to be enough? And then there just was so many different aspects of this that were disappointing. And you're talking about a team that had given up over 30 points a game last year, had given over 30 points a game in 2020, was giving up over 30 points a game this year, had lost 11 straight games to FBS opponents. People talking about, well, they just don't have the roster. I'm like, look, dog, we're not talking about playing 2012 Stanford.
Right.
We're not talking about playing – we're not talking about playing Clemson or Bama or Ohio State. We're talking about playing freaking Stanford, who has gone 11 straight games without beating an FBS opponent, and a team that 8 of those 11 losses were by double digits, Vince. And so you scored 14 points. That's not good enough. And for all the people that want to say, well, it was Drew Pine. Okay, Drew Pine did not play well Saturday. And we're going to talk through some of the stuff that he missed, but there was a lot of things where you're asking him to do things that you shouldn't be asking him to do. And you've went away from the things that you should have been doing with him. And we'll discuss that a little bit tonight, Vince. But we're going to start with the run game. And there's a few things with the run game that were frustrating. If you watch the film, Vince, and I'm not sure if you did watch a lot of the offense or if you just watched the
I focused on the defense primarily, but I remember watching the offense on Saturday.
I was actually more impressed with the play of the offensive line after the fact.
Yeah.
They were constantly running into outnumbered boxes.
Right.
There was one play early in the second half where they ran out of 12 personnel, basically ace formation, right? Just kind of like 2x2 out of 12. And they ran into literally a 10-man box. And Chris Tyree ran for like 7 yards because the offensive line just kind of pushed everybody forward. And it was just they actually did a pretty good job. There just was constantly somebody that they couldn't block there, which is what happens when you don't run RPOs. And when the way that you run the football kind of is a giveaway that you're not going to throw the football, right? And we'll get into some of that as well. But so I was actually more impressed with it. I thought Zeke Correll played a really good football game. I mean, everybody's going to have a missed snap here and there. I thought Zeke continues to ascend. Joe Alt was pretty good in this game. Blake Fisher was a little up and down. Josh Lugg was okay. He was some good snaps, some not so great snaps. Jarrett Patterson was okay. Thought Zeke played pretty well. But as a whole, I thought they played well-ish.
Sure.
But they were constantly running into outnumbered boxes. And a perfect example is they tried running counter. One of the plays I wanted to bring up, and you know what I might actually be able to do, Vince, is just to kind of show it. Some of this stuff we can actually show because it's just clips of it. So I'm gonna MacGyver this a little bit, Vince. So
I love it.
We're gonna do a little bit here actually.
While you're doing that, we talked about this in the previous show earlier today. Was that you can't, somebody said, well, you can't run behind this line and blah, blah, blah. That you're putting the line at a severe disadvantage. That's not on them.
Somebody said that in your guys' show?
Yeah. It was
I don't know what you're watching at that point.
Right.
In time. I really don't.
That's exactly right. You're like, well, you can't do anything if they're not moving guys. Well, when it's 5 versus 10.
But they were, though. That's the
exactly
thing. Is they
right.
were. I'm gonna pull up this play real quick. So this is the counter play. Remember the counter play they tried to run out of 13 personnel that they just completely got dominated, right?
I do.
I mean, it was one of those things where it's kind of like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. So let me pull this up. So can people still hear us? I just want to make sure when this overlay is up that people can still hear us. For example, okay. So Vince, this is a counter play. Look at this. This is a 10-man box, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying to run counter. Now, the problem is that out of this play, Vince, is, let me just make sure I got this one. This is the counter play. You don't have enough guys to block everybody. So you're trying to run counter in an opposite direction, and you don't have enough guys to account for. So the reason they're running counter, I believe this play went to the right, Vince, was supposed to go to the right. But the problem is you don't have enough guys to block everybody.
Right.
You've only got 8 blockers. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blockers, 1 running back, 1 quarterback, and they've got 10 guys in the box.
Correct.
Right. Well, and you're trying to run a misdirection play from the 13-yard line against that look. And then people are like, well, line didn't block anybody. I believe the guy that came running through, Vince, was the safety to the top. So if you look, the guy that's over the left guard, and there was literally no one there to account for him. He ran backside. I mean, 3 guys. Let's see, 8. 2 guys in this look, you just literally, no matter what happens, you can't block them. You can't block them. Especially on a misdirection play, which is a naturally slower developing play, which is okay. The slow developing is not, there's nothing wrong with slow developing plays. But against this look, it's just a bad look. Exactly. I mean, you're not going to have success against that look, Vince.
Right.
And those are things that we saw really a lot this game. You talked about the jet sweep look.
Scheme and coaching, right? That's not execution. Yes. I just want to make sure I'm clarifying for everybody, because you said he used the word execution 40 times in 2 press conferences. Well, this is an execution.
Right.
That's scheme and coaching.
Right. And you could say, look, here's the thing. If I wanted to be a prick and just hammer a coach because I didn't like him, I could find something like that in every single game that every single team plays. I could. But this is something that happens a lot. And that's the problem that you're finding, is there's times they're going to line up in 13 personnel and there's just nobody there. There's nobody to block. There's nobody to account for all the different guys that are in the box. And when you're in those kind of situations, it's like, what's the line supposed to do? This is the play that I'm going to bring up, this particular play. And this is the play where, I mean, you just talk about blame the offensive line. The reason this is another play, I believe this is early second half. This is a play to Chris Tyree. I believe this is the call, Vince, where they gained about 6 or 7 yards. And what happened is they just ran, this is basically right up the middle. It looked like a duo, maybe even a wedge. And the offensive line was able to collapse and just push everybody forward. And Chris Tyree just followed him and found a little bit of a crease. This is a 9-man box, right? I mean, that's hard sledding. The reason the counter didn't work is because you're running misdirections, you're pulling guys, and so you're not able to just kind of come off and fire off like you would like in a goal line situation where you come off and you fire off, and then if they're going to make that play, it's going to have to be someone coming off of the edge that you can't account for. Totally fine with that. I understand that. But when you're trying to run counter, you're opening up gaps. And then you've got to have your backside tackle kind of gap hinge on that play. Well, he can't gap hinge if you're running a counter and that look. There was other things about the game plan. They tried to run counter. Vince, I can't even describe this because I tried saying this to you at the beginning of the game or before the show started. They tried to run counter out of a formation where they had the Michael Mayer, the tight end, to the call side. So normally when you run counter, you have 2 guys coming backside. And so you'll have 1 guy from backside come and kick out. We've drawn up counter on this show 100 times. I mean, people know what counter is. And then they'll bring a backside guy. Now, there's 2 different types of ways to do it. One, you can bring a running back around on counter. I mean, I've in my coaching days, we've called it all 3 ways. You have a guard, the old school counter tray, which is the backside guard and tackle. You don't see that a ton anymore, Vince. You don't see counter tray a ton anymore. Or you can bring the tight end from an offset position and have him be kind of the kick out, and then the guard.
Notre Dame loves to do that.
The guard kicks out and the tight end wraps. That's normally how they do it, Vince.
They like that.
You can also do it with like an offset back, where you can have the back sort of be the kick out, and then the guard wraps, or vice versa, depending on how you want to do it. counter and power O are very similar schemes. It's just you're getting to a little bit different way. Power O is a little bit more of a quick hitter downhill kind of thing, where you like have a fullback or a tight end right there to just kick the edge out. Then
kind of like
you G-wrap them from backside
when they were in the I formation.
Right.
Yeah, that one.
Right. So there's different ways to do that. But what Notre Dame did against Stanford was they tried to counter with the play side tight end. So instead of bringing a tight end from the backside where he can get some momentum and kind of go around, instead, they tried to bring him here, so then he faked a counter and then went back into the hole with no momentum. And I'm like, that is just trying to be smarter than everybody else, but not. Right. And my whole thing is the problem with all of that is Stanford is a slow defense. And when you went through an entire game and you ran, 2 outside run plays, the other was the goal line play. And I wanted to bring that up as well, Vince, because I want to explain what Coach Freeman was talking about today.
And why that one specifically?
He did. Well, he said that Tommy told him that Coach Reese told him that they didn't have the look that they needed, and Coach told him to run it anyway. Which I pray that that's just him trying to protect his coordinator. I pray for that.
So Marcus Freeman is saying that he told him to run the play, even though,
and Coach Freeman said I should have called timeout because Tommy told him they didn't have the look. But here's my whole point, though. What look were you expecting? So this is the look. This is the jet sweep look. Like you're at the 5-yard line. When you run this look out of this, I mean, you're in 13 personnel. You're gonna have a 10-man box. Now,
correct.
You could say now, like where this play would work, Vince, is if they were going to try to stretch this, right? Like stretch it, and let Jaden find a hole to then have a vertical insertion to, right?
You need 2 yards,
right? But what they're doing here is they actually had the tight ends, the 2 tight ends backside. So Eli Raridan and Michael Mayer were kicked out, right, to work outside. But from Joe Alt inside, they were all down blocking. So think about this. If Joe Alt and Jarrett Patterson are down blocking, think of the guys that are outside of them. Look at the numbers. There's 4 guys outside of them. Now, that's the thing that Coach Reese was saying is, hey, we don't have the look anymore. And if Coach Freeman is
accurate,
if I'm going to assume that Marcus Freeman didn't just make up a story, right, and give him the benefit of the doubt that he was telling the truth, that's one of those inexperienced head coach situations. And it's also an inexperienced head offensive coordinator situation, because if that's a 40-year-old offensive coordinator, a guy that's been doing this a long time, he's going to say, Coach, we need to call a timeout. We don't have the look. And then you're going to
insist on it.
You're going to debate with the head coach until he does what you want him to do and calls timeout. I mean, that's what an experienced offensive coordinator is going to do. But you have 2 inexperienced guys, which is, stuff like that's going to happen, right? I can live with that. Okay, I can live with that stuff.
And they were out leveraged. I mean, it was 4 for 2, right?
Outnumbered and out leveraged, correct?
Right. And they were, I will also say that Michael Mayer did not get a good block. He got blown up, and it forced Thomas to go inside, maybe earlier than he wanted to. I don't know, but he got blown back and ended up throwing the guy down, but it impeded the progress that Jaden Thomas had. Like, if Jaden Thomas has that entire field to work all the way to the sideline, maybe he finds a little bit of a crease because he stretches out the defense. But
it's still a bad call to give to Jaden Thomas.
I completely agree with you.
Because to your point, you're asking your slowest receiver, and I'm not saying that to insult Jaden Thomas.
It's just
there's a lot you can do with Jaden Thomas. A lot you can do with Jaden Thomas. But they're not doing those things with him nearly enough. And that's not a play, hey, he's going to get to the sideline. Why are you asking him to get to the sideline? I mean, it's just not a run he should have done. So there's just a lot of stuff like that where you're just like, what are you guys doing? Like, I can't even, like, sometimes I can say, Vince, like, hey, look, here's what they're trying to do. I get what they're trying to do on the jet sweep. I do. They had a bad look. That one I understand. I just think it was bad. I just don't think it was smart. Not in that look,
and even if in a different look, I don't like the personnel running it, and I don't like the play call.
Like if Tyler Buckner's still the quarterback, and you wanted to run that with a power read look, where if they run with the jet, then he pulls it and runs,
which they did, by the way. I mean, they totally ran with the jet. I mean,
but you can't run the power read out of that look. I mean, they were under center. There was a lot wrong with it. That's the other problem. That people hate running under center. That's a look I would have done under center, because you'd have had Jaden further back to get the jet, which means he could bow it a little bit more and have a better vertical cut point
and go around the Michael Mayer block.
Correct. So there just was a lot wrong with it, but there's just a lot of plays like that, Vince. And that was kind of my issue with the game plan was there was just way too much of that. You had no inside run at all. You had no creativity with your run game. And look, here's my thing. I am not someone, I've said this a lot of times, we're always going to be consistent here. I'm not someone who believes that you have to you have to say, hey, we're going to run 8 different run concepts or 12 different run concepts in a game. No, I mean, you can get away with running 4 or 5 run concepts in a game. The problem is they can't all be downhill in the A and B gaps. Right. And that's what we saw on Saturday. And so you can kind of defend all of them the same way. And especially then you start putting in a bunch of 12 personnel and 13 personnel and you're running those same things. And then you're wondering why we're always outnumbered and why we're not getting the movement. I mean, again, you're getting movement, but why it doesn't look like you're getting movement, because if I got 2 block, like why does a double team work? 2 guys block 1 guy and get movement. What we were seeing on Saturday was 2 guys were trying to block 3 guys.
Right.
And the outnumbered guy usually doesn't get the movement.
Right.
There was a lot of that. And that's why in the fact that Notre Dame does almost no RPO. And when they do, it's like some little kind of designed RPO with a slide route. There's nothing to say, hey, if they want to bring 10 in the box against 11 personnel, then we're going to take a shot outfield, or we're going to take a slant, or we're going to run a glance, or we're going to do whatever the case may be. And so those are the things you look at and you say, but Vince, this is football 101 stuff, man.
Correct.
You know, and at no point in time on Saturday did Notre Dame do anything with its run game or pass game to try to get the speed advantage that they do have. And again, you say, oh, personnel is not that good. Can we all at least agree they have more speed than Stanford?
And
you know what I mean? Like,
I mean,
just this game, just Stanford. Right. We're talking about this game, just this game, just Stanford. Because I think Marshall has a more athletic defense than Stanford does. This is the least athletic defense they faced all season, and it's not really close in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you did nothing. And honestly, Vince, they just regurgitated last week's game plan.
And Marcus Freeman admitted to as much.
Run game.
He said that. He's like, we had the same game plan against North Carolina and BYU, and it worked because we executed, but it didn't work against you know, Stanford. Well, I would have been like, okay, back the train up. Why do you have the same game plan 3 games in a row? Why are you even watching film then? Yeah. You know, what's the point?
Right. And like the counter to that, but well, look, every team runs the same stuff week after week after week. That's true, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
What I'm saying is the same game plan.
Right.
Like same formations, same calls.
Yes.
People say, well, you know, Coach Freeman said today the game plan was fine. I'm like, no, it was not. And I know what if he's being honest, because one of 2 things is happening there. One is he's protecting his offensive coordinator. My counter to that is people say, well, you know, you can't throw your coordinator under the bus. Not asking him to. Never once asked him to throw anybody under the bus. Everybody here knows I hate that. That's why I used to hammer Kelly about that all the time. Don't say, you know, Tommy called a bad game. We had our game plan going in was poor. We did a bad job. I'm not asking for that. Because that could hurt you, not just with how it make Reese look, but it makes you look bad because you're the head coach. How did you allow that to happen?
Right.
So you obviously don't. I'm not asking for that, but there's a difference between that and vociferously defending the offensive coordinator twice.
Yes.
He said he's doing an excellent job, is what he said after the game.
Yep.
And then today, but then other times he'll say things like, we got to do a better job of putting guys in position to make plays. And I'm like, amen. Preach, coach, preach.
And then
that gets followed up with comes later. And I'm like, don't tell me you're afraid to be critical of Tommy Reese, because you were darn sure critical of Drew Pine during today's press conference. He was very critical of Drew Pine's play today. I'm like, so Drew can handle it, but Tommy can't? If that's true, that says a lot about the dynamic in the coaching staff, and that's incredibly problematic. That you're willing to be harder on your 20-year-old quarterback than you are your 30-year-old offensive coordinator, that's a problem.
Yep.
That's the problem. And no, the head coach does not create the game plan. The coordinators do.
Right.
So that's a big concern for me, Vince. But the game plan was not good. It was very archaic. It was slow. The scan stuff is gotta go. Listen, let me say something. Every team in America looks to the sideline at times. But when here's why it's an issue now. There are certain instances where I would have been somewhat okay with it. If you have a very experienced team, a very experienced quarterback, and you want to go, it's a little bit of tempo. But if you're going to do it where it's every snap, you've got to be full. Teams that I see that look to the sideline a lot are teams that go fast. The problem with doing it the way Notre Dame does it, or it's every play, is you have no momentum and no rhythm, Vince. You get up to the line of scrimmage slowly, you look to the sideline, and one of two things is happening. One is you're either getting a call. Well, one of three things is happening. One is you confirm the call. Look sideline, go with what's called. Bam, you run it. The other is check to something else. Or number three is, and Freeman said this last week, sometimes we'll get up to the line of scrimmage and there's no call. Like they don't have a play called. And so when you have that kind of thing going on, then, look, they're gonna kind of get into a situation where it's like, okay, now we've got to get the call, get the play call. Now there's 6 seconds on the play clock. Now Drew Pine, who's making his fourth career start, has to quickly scan the defense and see what my read is on a play that I just got called with 7 or 8 seconds left on the play clock. That is not putting your quarterback in position to be successful. And then there's plays where he's having a full field read. And there's some calls we're going to I'm going to try to kind of, it's not an ideal situation, everybody, because of StreamYard, and so we can't point things out. But I'm going to try to add some things that I can. But none of the past stuff really makes a lot of sense to just show up because I'd have to try to talk through it. But for example, there's a play where you've got like a go route. It's a 2x2 formation. You've got a go route and an out cut by Michael Mayer. Backside, you've got a deep drag. It's kind of deep over, so it's not an in. It's not a drag. It's like kind of an up and over. So it's like a climb route is what I call it.
Okay.
Vince, I don't know if you guys called it the same thing. It's kind of up, like at a 45, then up, and then kind of over behind the backers that way. We call that a climb route.
We weren't that complicated. We didn't have that particular route in the tree.
And then backside, you had a deep corner or deep stop route, and then a swing.
Right.
And so pre-snap, you had 3/2 to Mayer's side, and then you had kind of 3/2 to this side, but you had the back coming out of the backfield on a check or on a free release swing. So it's really 3-3. And Drew's got to go backside on that route. But it's also a play that's designed to full field read. So I'm going to read the side to Mayer and then come back to that. And that's asking a lot of a fourth game starting quarterback. It's also asking a lot of a fourth game starting quarterback when you had to look to the sideline and get that play called in with like 8 seconds left. Right. You see what I'm saying? So you say, well, Drew missed it. Well, Drew Pine against North Carolina, there was not as much of that scan stuff. And Drew looked great. Right. And what we said last week in this space was you got to be careful doing the scan stuff too much because you can lose rhythm. And then also you can get too complex with it. Right. We can get the right call in every time. Sometimes, especially when the other team sucks and Stanford sucks. And I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to that.
It just is what it is.
The numbers are what they are, folks. But when you're playing it, sucks is not a good term, right? That's an inferior opponent. Production-wise, talent-wise, coaching-wise, in every capacity. And if it's not an inferior opponent from a coaching standpoint, then you need new coaches. But I don't believe that to be true. I don't think it's inferior. So then you look at it, Vince, and you say, okay, you shouldn't have to every single snap outplan. Because here's the counter. People say, well, Notre Dame doesn't have the talent, and so the margin for error is smaller. And my point is, if that's true, let's go with that premise for a second. If that's true, then you're doing the exact opposite thing of what you should be doing because the routes they're calling are routes that require wins. They're win routes, meaning you got to beat that guy. And if your players aren't that good, then stop calling so many win routes and do more bunch, do more reduce, do more high lows, get guys moving, do more motions, do more screens, do more free releases, do things to steal yards. If you don't think your players are that good, then you better be the RPO runningest team in the country.
Yes,
because that's where you got to steal yards.
Yep.
So you're doing the exact opposite thing of what you should be doing if you are correct and the roster is not good. So the argument, the counter that you're making to me makes zero sense from a football standpoint. Zero. Right. If your talent's not good, why are you only throwing Lorenzo Styles the ball on go routes where he's got to win one-on-one? Now, were some of those throws off target? Sure. Does Lorenzo need to fight for the ball a little bit better? Yeah, sure, he does. But if you're telling me your talent's not good, why are you running that call? Why are you running and why are you running it to him? Why aren't you running it to Deion Coles or Tobias Merriweather, who you can at least just say, hey, just throw it up to? Just they're bigger than that guy. Just throw it up, give him a chance.
Right.
So then you look at some of the past stuff, and so then some of the misses by Drew start to make sense. Like, okay, I get that. I see why he missed that, and then when a kid is not confident in what's happening in front of him, Vince, then what's going to happen is he's going to then what? Vince, when you had a quarterback in your career, and I know you've had times where you've got an inexperienced quarterback and a really good skill player. When a kid is not sure of what's going to happen, what's his automatic go-to?
He goes
I'm
to
not sure
the guy he trusts.
I'm just going to ace.
Yeah, 100%.
And he is super patient with letting Mayer get open. But when it's another player, he's quick to go away from it and go back to Mayer. That's something Drew's going to have to get back on. But who's coaching him up to do that?
Exactly. Wait,
he's a junior. He's a junior,
a true junior.
At some point in time, when look, the last two of the last three quarterbacks that Notre Dame has had, well, actually 3 of the last 4. What's the complaint been? It was the complaint with Ian Book. It was a complaint with Tyler Buckner. It's a complaint with Drew Pine. They're not going through their reads. They're locking it on one guy. They're late with the ball. The anticipation isn't there. Who was the one exception in the last 5 years? The one exception, Jack Cohn. And now I see the Tommy supporters saying, well, Jack Cohn got developed by Paul Christ and his staff, not Tommy Rees.
That's the difference.
And so Jack could do all that stuff. And if your offense is such that you always need a fifth-year quarterback to run it, that's a you problem, not a player problem.
Correct.
And so that's where I think Coach Freeman was correct when he said we got to put our guys in a better position to make plays. Because, yes, there were misses by Drew Pine. And some of the misses, I'm like, okay, that's not coaching, right? Like, I know Tommy Rees didn't coach him up to throw the ball 18 feet over Braden Lindsey's head when he was wide open for a touchdown. That's not on him, right? That's not on Rees. But kids are going to have those misses. I've seen good coach play. I've seen Trevor Lawrence just sail a ball and just get mad at himself. It's going to happen. But when it's then compounded by all the other stuff, that's when your offense stalls.
Correct.
And so then you're doing stuff where you've got a lot of times you got very slow developing routes. There's not you're asking guys to just constantly free release.
That's been the complaint though for years with this offense. It was our guys are better than yours, and these are what this is what we're going to do to prove that we're better, and that's all we know how to do. That's what we do. There's never we're going to scheme to get guys open. We saw a little bit of that in Drew's first 2 starts. We did, like Logan Diggs running that backside route that he ran, right? There were little things that they were doing to make Drew successful and to make the guys around him successful. But now it's like they fell back into the old pattern of we're just going to, hey, our guys are better than yours, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to run it between the tackles all night long because our guys are better than yours. It doesn't matter how many they got in the box.
But past coaches have shown creativity with doing that, though. Like a perfect example. Who's the guy that Tommy Rees replaced? It was Chip Long, right?
Correct.
And we'd have some criticism with Chip Long at times, but he only ran 4 or 5 run plays a game too. But it was inside zone, counter, G scheme, buck sweep, and he'd put something else in there, right? Right. So you'd mix it up. There's some downhill stuff. There's some pin and pull stuff. There's some creativity. Yes. Then, like the creative stuff, like here's an example. If a team is playing you hard, remember this play against USC in 2018? First half, Notre Dame was struggling against USC because what was happening is whenever they'd run G scheme or buck sweep. So those are plays where you have a blocker blocks down and the guy. So like if I'm a guard and I got a guy on my outside shoulder and we're running buck sweep, the tackle's going to block the guy on my shoulder. And then I'm pinning it. I'm pulling. I'm coming out. I'm either kicking out or I'm wrapping around. So pin a guy down and pull. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so what you'll see in those instances is it's just a different look. It's creating holes where the zone, the holes are created by how the defense moves and the movement, where you're trying to create a running lane with these concepts. So what was happening against USC in 2018 was as soon as the guards would pull, USC would just fly downhill because they had felt they had a tendency where when Notre Dame would pull, that's where they were going. Well, duh. Because that's most teams do. So what Chip Long countered with is he ran the buck sweep look to the right with both guards pulling, but he ran Dexter Williams backside on just a sweep backside.
It was just
and
a
there
sweep.
was
That's
nobody
all it
out
was.
there.
Cole I feel like he threw that up in the dirt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like, hey, this is what they're doing up front. They're watching our up front.
Yeah, they're king the guards.
Just do that and then go. Just go.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then they take him and they just ran, and it was a 50-yard touchdown. right? That's just like, hey, that's called scheming somebody up. That's called showing smartness, right? Just coming out and saying we're going to run duo and counter and mid zone the whole flipping game and just be better. No, that's not being better. That's calling you have a very, especially when you just did that the last game. Right. So Stanford knew what was coming and they were prepared for it. Stanford could also tell, you could tell the way when you go back and watch film, you can tell that Stanford kind of had a pretty good idea when it was run or pass.
Yes.
Because you could see how the safeties would manipulate before the snap. Like they feel pretty strongly it's going to be run here. And more often than not, they were correct. So, I mean, there was some stuff that got open, right? There were some plays that were designed to get open. He got Tobias Merriweather open twice, which is another problem is when you're going to talk about there's a thin margin for error, then the margin you need to lean on is put your most talented dudes on the field. Right. And Tobias Merriweather showed on Saturday that he is the most talented receiver on the roster.
Yes.
He can flat run by people.
And he
why did it take you 6 games to get him on the field?
Route, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, that was a good route.
Braden Lindsey ran a similar route later, and here's why that works. So people that want to understand, let's actually pull. Well, we can't pull it up, unfortunately. But what happened was the safety. So they ran a 3-by-1 to that side. So it was 12 personnel. So it was a great call. It was one of the best calls of the year by Coach Reese. They run a 3-by-1. Actually, I can actually pull up I can at least show. I can at least show the formation and so we can kind of talk through it that way. So just let me just pull this up here real quick, and so you all can get a look at what the play looked like. So again, I can't chalkboard it up today, but you can at least get a sense of what it looks like.
It's my favorite part of the show.
I know, I'm bummed about it. So this is what the play is. So this is out of 12 personnel. So this is a really good call, right? So let's look at the numbers. You got 5 guys up front. You got 3 guys on the second level. That's 8 in a box, and you have a safety that's clearly playing the run. And then you've got one-on-ones outside. So Notre Dame ran a little bit of a play action here, but so what you had at the bottom of the screen is Mitchell Evans. Mitchell Evans runs like a 10-yard out cut to take away that defender. And then Michael Mayer ran a backside seam. It wasn't really a backside seam. It looked like a backside seam, Vince, but basically what you could see from Mayer was he was actually attacking the leverage of the safety.
Correct.
Because once he got leverage on him, then he flattened it out and ran across his face.
Right.
So basically what Mayer was doing
trying
is
to occupy the safety.
Well, occupy or cross his face to where now you're the target. So basically make that safety make a decision. Is he running with you or is he going to drop deep?
Right.
So Mayer does a great job of getting across. And then what Tobias does, so if you can see on this route, the safety's lined up inside of Tobias.
Yep.
So Vince, you've heard me say this before. What's my first release teaching point when I'm talking to a receiver? Attack the leverage of the defender, because the reason he's playing you there is because he's trying to protect something with his leverage. Okay.
Yep.
So Tobias does a great job, Vince. His first step was kind of working inside. Then once he eats the leverage up, then you see Tobias square the guy up and then gets on. So he works inside, gets vertical on a stem. He's got now the leverage advantage is gone. So now this guy is like, okay, this guy took my leverage away. Now he can beat me outside or inside. And so then Tobias leans him outside. The guy opens his hips and he just smokes him to the post. And that's the same thing Braden Lindsey did on the play. And Braden was even more open than Tobias was.
So open.
But Braden did the same thing. It was a really well run route. And but the thing with Tobias is he's so long that he got over the top of the guy. And once he gets over the top of the guy, if you just throw it over the top, there's no chance.
Yeah.
The first time Tobias got open, it was a trips formation and he ran a wide fade. They ran double in cuts, double quick ends outside, and Tobias ran a wide fade. And then it was open and Drew put, you and I talked about in the press, he just put too much mustard on it and it didn't give Tobias a chance to run underneath it.
He needed to float
Second time, he did a much better job of that. He threw it over the top. It got up and over the defense, and he allowed Tobias to run underneath it. He outran him, it was a great ball. Great ball by Drew. But my point is, Vince, is if you'd have hit this in the first quarter, and it was there in the first quarter, that opens up so much other stuff for you running the football later. This was the first play of the fourth quarter, and I just love the fact that Tobias's first catch, it was a fourth quarter throw that put the team up. They were trailing in the fourth quarter. So, hey, I guess you can trust him now, right? Since he came through in the fourth freaking quarter of a game you were losing. But he steps up. But my point is you do stuff like this early so that way it opens up those other opportunities. This was one of the best calls that Coach Reese made. It was great formationally. It was great from the setup. It was great where we the route concepts, we're going to stress Stanford. It's a high-low concept, right? It's done from a little bit of a horizontal alignment, stretch alignment, but it's really it's a vertical concept because you have the out and then the deep end and then the post coming out over top of it. So great call here, great execution, and it was a play where Drew's got one read, the safety. If he goes back, throw it to Mayer. If he comes up, throw it over the top. Drew had confidence in it. He let it rip. It was accurate. It was on point. This wasn't a full field read. And guess what? Drew had confidence.
Keep it simple.
In a clutch moment. And when they did things like this, it was a little bit easier for him. And, there were some other times he missed that I can't necessarily hammer him for it. But, the OC for it, other than, hey, you're the offensive coordinator, so, do your job, right? So anyway, Vince, this was one of the calls that I really liked in the game. But my point is here's what bothers me about it. It's a great call, Coach. Great design, great personnel usage, all of it. Here's the problem. Why did you wait till the second half to do that?
And why didn't you come back to it, though, either? Either one.
Right. Well, because once they got the 14-13 lead,
well, then they downshifted, but
well, yeah, or it was like 16-14, and they still kept trying to just like run the football, but that's a different conversation for a different day.
Okay.
The point being is you had those looks in the first half. Why was that not part of your game plan early? You went to that because nothing else is working. That's basically why you went to that play. Nothing else was really working. My thing is that should have been a part of your early game plan. And I've shared this story with people in the chat before. It's the story that Lou Samoji has told me about, Rocket Ismail's first game. And I'm not comparing Rocket Ismail to Tobias Merriweather. They're different players. And Rocket was but they have a similar impact in that they are legit vertical players who can stretch the field.
Correct.
The point here is the reason that this was a frustrating thing is because the story Lou had told is Lou had Tony Rice and Rocket together, and he said, "You're just going to go." And he said to Tony Rice, "Just throw it to Rocket. He says, just drop back and throw it as far as you can, because that's about the only way you could hit Rocket on a go route is if you threw it as far as you could." And he's like, "I don't care." And Lou's comment was, "I don't care if it's incomplete. I don't care anything." He goes, "Because I want Michigan to know that they're going to have to cover that all night and be prepared to cover that all night." And that's it's a cheesy story, but that's part of what game planning is. Is like, look,
correct.
I know part of being a good game planner is saying it's not just about coming up with some plays that can work. It's about knowing what your opponent is going to do. And if I'm a coach and I know that this is what we are good at, and this is how teams are going to play us, and I know what our offense is trying to do early, so I'm going to be prepared to counter that or give you something to chew on before you have a chance to figure out the other stuff. That should have been a play they called on the first or second series of the game.
Yep.
First or second series of the game, where you go 12 personnel, because what is 12 personnel for Vince for Notre Dame? Very heavy run alignment.
Absolutely.
What do they do when Tobias Merriweather has been in the game so far this year? Run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Every cue that you have would have told the other team this is a run, and then you bang it over top of their head. What are they going to have to do the rest of the game? They're going to be in trouble, because now it's like, okay, and we've talked about this in 2017. How did Chip Long get USC to back off their defense in 2017? On the first three series of the game, he ran a reverse, a post for a touchdown, and a backside shoulder to Kevin Severson for a touchdown. Once they hit him over the top and hit him with the reverse, it's like, you got nothing. Nothing we can do.
Right.
We can't stop their run without putting numbers in the box. When we put numbers in the box, they throw it over our freaking head, right? Or run a reverse. What are we supposed to do? And then what did USC do for the rest of the game? They quit. Because you could see it in their eyes and in their heads, like they're like, we can do nothing to stop this team.
And then they just punch them in the mouth with the run game.
Right. What would happen if this Notre Dame team came out on their first series and Drew Pine throws a post route for a 60-yard, 70-yard post route for a touchdown?
Stanford quits.
Even if it's not a touchdown, what if he just throws a 50-yard bomb, Tobias catches it, and the guy tackles him?
Right.
It's like, okay, well, now shoot. This isn't good.
Right.
And then the next series you come out and you throw that wide fade to him and you hit that for third. Even if you miss it, though, here's the thing. Even the miss, this is what the miss says to Stanford. You better be – we're going to go back to that. And I promise you he's not missing next time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the risk you want to run? We can't cover this kid, but we're okay. We're just going to hope the quarterback can never complete the pass. Quarterback who's completed over 70% of his passes the last 2 games. Because don't you love it how all these people are telling us that Drew Pine was the savior the last 2 weeks and now he stinks? It's like,
Yeah.
How about he was neither? How about he's a young kid still learning the game? And he's going to have some ups and downs.
Yeah, and he okay, did I expect the highs to be as high as they were and the low to be as low as it was? I'll say no. I expected him to be somewhere in between what we saw the first 2 weeks and what we saw on Saturday. Somewhere in between lies the true Drew Pine, in my opinion. Can you win with that? Absolutely, you can win with that.
Right.
No question. But that's who Drew Pine is, and that's okay. You can't be mad at Drew Pine for being Drew Pine. And I'm stealing the words from Sean Stiers, right? Drew Pine is who he is, right? He's not Trevor Lawrence. You can't expect him to be who he's not, right? Don't be mad at Drew Pine for being Drew Pine. Did he make some mistakes? 100%. No doubt about it. And we've chronicled the mistakes that he made. He's going to make mistakes, though. He's not going to be the 75%
mistakes.
completion guy that he was the first 2 weeks. That's not logical.
Well, not every week, but I see where you and I disagree is I do think Drew can be that kind of guy.
Okay.
Consistently, when you give him a chance against a game plan where what was he doing? Getting the ball out quick, running with some tempo against Carolina, right? Getting the ball out quick, mixing up your looks.
That I
designing
agree with.
plays to get the ball to different people. You're calling plays to get the balls, the running backs the ball. Remember that? Remember his first 2 starts when they were calling all these plays to get the running backs the football? Where's that go?
And I was praising Tommy Rees for the game plan and Drew for executing.
You got athletic running backs and they got slow linebackers, and we're not doing anything to get the running backs involved in the game plan, like down the field throwing the football. It's just stuff like that, Vince. We're like, no, that the game plan was not faulty. It is regurgitated last week's game plan. Well,
right.
Specifically
guess what?
The run game, their coaches watch film too, y'all.
Right.
That's specifically the run game was the pass game was pretty similar too, Vince. The whole thing was pretty similar.
But I don't even care about that. If they run the proper run game plan, hit some outside stuff, bang them like that, and I think that opens up everything else, and you can continue to run the ball and you can do what you wanted to do.
It.
That's my issue. You can run. You can be a run first team. I have no problem with that.
Because what does that pass call to Tobias do? You used your run game and Mayer to bait him into that.
Yes, exactly. And that's my thing, right? You can be a run first team, but if Stanford has a strength on defense, if they even have one, where is it? It's right up the middle.
They're okay in the box. They're okay in the box.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they their strength, and I'm not saying it's a big strength, but their strength is up the middle. What are you doing?
Because what Ryan and I said last week, Vince, is because they like to get their safeties. Their safeties are good in the run.
Yes.
And the game plan Notre Dame had was to get their safeties in the run. Look what happened the one time they asked the safety to cover a slot down the field. What happened?
Got beat by a true freshman.
Got smoked by a kid who you couldn't trust the first 5 games of the year. Right? I say that sarcastically.
Yes, you do.
So those are my problems. We're back to the same old stuff of when it doesn't work, we're going to be critical of the coordinator, the quarterback, but then not the coordinator. And, it's just look, Drew Pine is a better quarterback than some people give him credit for, and not as good of a quarterback as some other people. He's a solid quarterback.
Yes,
absolutely. And if you give put some players around him, you could beat a lot of teams with Drew Pine. You just beat North Carolina and BYU with Drew Pine. So don't tell me that when you lose to freaking Stanford that the talent's not good enough.
Right. Exactly.
That's bull crap.
Right.
That's the same bullcrap excuse making we had with Brian Kelly throughout his entire career when people would justify why he was 3-16 against teams in the top 10. Well, I don't have the players. Whose job is it to get the players? But again, we're not even talking about a record against top 10 teams, Vince. We're talking about Stanford, who was 1-11 coming into that game. 1-11 coming into that game. 0-11 against FBS teams.
Correct.
0-11 against FBS teams. And I'm supposed to believe that Drew Pine doesn't have the talent to beat them when he went on the road and hung up 45 on North Carolina. He hung up 28 on BYU. And I'm supposed to believe that Drew Pine doesn't have the talent to put up more than 14 on Stanford? Or maybe you didn't put him in a position to be successful. You turned him into a drop-back quarterback. Gone was the pocket movement. Gone was as there was some play action, but gone was the quick stuff. Gone was the stuff where to the backs. Because what was the stuff to the backs? It was one read. It was this to this. You know, what was the play? What was the stuff to Mayer? It was this to this on against Carolina. It was a 2-man seam route on the touchdown to Lorenzo Styles. Read it inside out, baby. Take where it goes. Now he had 2 good games. So now let's put these full field reads in the game. We're asking him to scan play side to backside. Let's go with a scan offense every single play, which gives him no chance to get in rhythm. Gives because here's the thing, folks. You know what the defense does when the offense is looking to the sidelines? They're looking to the sidelines.
They're looking to the sidelines.
Their call. And then no decent defense is just going to stand where they told them to stand. You know, they're going to do some kind of moves, and then Drews gets that call, and then okay, like if you're going to scan every play, your team better be freaking hustling the line of scrimmage, getting as soon as the ball's set, you're lined up and ready to go. You know what you have to do in those instances? Every now and then, you actually got to snap it and go.
You got to go.
Right?
Correct.
Right? And hey, like I've seen good offensive coordinators go tempo and literally run. I saw Chip Long do this at Memphis one time. They went tempo and they literally ran G scheme left or right for like 8 straight plays right down the field. They just lined up and ran it because it's just like, you need to know that we will do this to you. But if you're getting up the line of scrimmage, they know you're not going to snap it because they're going to wait. And guess what? The defense is going to let you. Then the D coordinator is going to say, let's see what Notre Dame lines up in. And then we'll make our call.
Yeah.
Like they think the defense is back there saying, oh, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? I don't know. We've got our call, but we're just going to sit here and wait for them to make their call and not do anything the whole time. Okay. All right. Now they got their call. No, they're going to be freaking looking at what you're lined up in.
Exactly.
Right. And so then the whole thing is just silly. And then you're going to say it's Drew Pine's fault. Right. And look, I was a Tyler Buckner guy. I thought Tyler Buckner should have been starting quarterback. I'm not someone who advocated for Drew Pine being a starter, but what we did say is you can beat a lot of teams if you use Drew Pine correctly.
Absolutely. No
They
question.
used him correctly against North Carolina. They didn't use him as correctly against BYU, at least, at times, but at times they did. They let him get some quick reads out. But then they come to this game and it's like, let's show everyone how smart we are again. And it just, some of the stuff they did it just made no sense. Some of the stuff was just, Vince, it just made no sense. And so that was the frustrating thing for me in this game is I just look at this stuff and I'm like, yeah, he had some misses. He forced some balls. There was a corner out to Mitchell Evans that was open, and he just locked in on Michael Mayer. Well, we told you that was a problem last week. And this is what, like somebody on Twitter was like, well, if they would have won, you'd be saying the same stuff. You wouldn't be saying this. And I said, yeah, I would, because we said this last week against BYU.
Go back and watch any of the shows.
It worked last week, but
yes,
you can't keep doing this.
But see, we talked about that in the previous show too. We have talked many, many times about how easy it is, and I use the word easy relatively, how easy it is to coach up a team after a win, right? To me, when you beat BYU, you threw it to Michael, you forced a lot of stuff into Michael Mayer, you were successful doing that. That's great. And here's what you say as a coach. Okay, here's this one where you got it to Michael Mayer, you forced it in, but look at where these other guys are and look at this guy that's open or look at this guy that's open and how we could have gone to that. Hey, great job getting it to Mayer. That's fine. But look where else we could have gone. You have to coach them up in that regard. It felt like to me, and this is me talking, it felt like to me, it was more like a butt slap. Hey, great job. Let's go to next week. Like it wasn't coached, hey, you did a great job getting it to Mayer. Let's do it again. Like, it wasn't.
That's what it looked like.
Other options. Yes,
that's what it looked like to me.
Me too.
And everybody's like, well, you can't justify missing that many throws. Yeah, you can. Any football coach, any former football coach, current football coach, former player, current player will tell you, if I'm not sure what I'm doing, I'm not going to play with the same confidence and release. And you could see that Drew was uncomfortable with where to go with the football because they were asking him to do more this week. Yes. There was full field scans and all this different kind of stuff. And that's the reality of it. And the fact is like you put him in a bad position. Now, were some of those throws just bad misses by Drew? Yeah. But those are then compounded by all the other stuff you're doing that's not giving your offense a chance to make those plays.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
And so we're back at it again. The coaching is the problem. Let's throw the quarterback under the bus. Right? A kid like a week ago, Drew was this great player that was completing 70% of his passes, and everybody's praising him. 1 week later, people bench him for Steve Angeli. Right? Okay, so we can do what? Then have the same problem with Steve Angeli? After a couple games of people getting film on him, he's back to not being good. And then now it's like, let's run Paulus the third, baby.
Woo!
You know, I mean, where does this end? Where does this end before we finally say the quarterbacks are not the problem?
Right.
So that's
Agreed.
my frustration, Vince, is because your job is to figure out how you can use your scheme and your talents to get the most out of your players. And what we're seeing right now is the same old story. Because
Correct.
the guy that there's now learned from the guy that brought it here. This is about me showing everybody how smart I am.
Correct.
And that's when it doesn't get executed, it ain't my fault because look how I designed it up. This is because look how I designed it up. Look how I designed it up. It was open.
Right.
Yeah, but your kid didn't know how to read it. So I don't care if it's open if he doesn't know how to read it. If you're giving him 5 seconds to then get the call, then look at the freaking defense, and then you're going to be shocked that a kid that's in his 4th career start doesn't know what to do.
Right. Yep.
Right? And Tende says this. I love this comment by Tende. I'm sorry. Says, why wouldn't they know that Stanford game plan to stop 87? We hit 6 different receivers at BYU.
Because BYU didn't have a plan to stop us. So they figured everybody was going to be like that.
When sometimes Drew just made some great balls and it didn't matter. Well, this game he was off a little bit. He wasn't on in this game. And so it just compounded it. And so those are the things that really frustrate me is I'm just tired of people, including Coach Freeman. I was very disappointed in Coach Freeman today. And everybody here knows I'm a big supporter of Marcus Freeman. Big supporter of him as a head football coach. Still am. And my hope is that he's just saying this to protect his coach. But
which I would understand. I get it.
But the fact is we're now 6 games in and we've heard him do this before. And we would say, I think he's just defending his coach. But then they'd go out the next week and do the same exact thing.
Right. And that's a problem.
So that tells me maybe he actually believes it. And then he comes out today and he's very critical of Drew Pine. Go back and read the transcript. He was very critical of Drew Pine. But yet with Coach Reese, it's no. We got to treat him with kid gloves, right? Like we he's doing a great job. We love him. You don't want him to get upset. Right? I mean, what are we doing here? Right? What are you doing here? Because then what's going to happen is you're going to put Steve Angeli in the game, and then he's going to struggle and fail, and then his confidence is going to get shot, and now he's
taking a true freshman. He's going to be done.
Right?
Can't have that.
Right?
Cannot have that.
So this is what they need to own it. You know what? We put Drew in a bad spot. We asked too much. Of him.
Why is that so much?
We did. If you can't trust your talent to beat Stanford, then go find something else to do. Because you recruited these kids here.
Right.
Who's been the longest tenured member of this coaching staff? Notre Dame.
Tom Reese.
Right?
2017
players. He's been the OC for 3 years now. Who recruited all these kids?
Right.
Who recruited Deion Colsey? Who recruited Chris Tyree? Who recruited
and if your issues with the quarterback room, he's the quarterback coach.
Right.
And we talked about that too. So good programs, right? If you want to talk about the Ohio State,
Cade McNamara was better than KJ Jefferson. Not me.
Right.
Not me.
And good programs stack quarterback recruits. Okay. These guys want to come in, they want to compete, they don't win the job, they transfer fine, but you got a guy right behind him who's just as good, ready to go. That has not been the case in the quarterback room at Notre Dame. It just hasn't been. And so if you want to complain about the quarterback room, you got to look at the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator, who are the same person. That's a problem. Right now, you got Drew Pine, you got Tyler Buckner, you got Steve Angeli. If you don't like those 3 guys, and you got nobody in the 23 class right now,
who's to blame for that?
And if your solution is to have a kid who's supposed to be a junior in high school reclassified to come play college football, that's not the solution either. I'm sorry.
Right.
That's not the solution. So
because then we're going to be having the same arguments when he's here early. Correct. Man, this kid just doesn't process quickly. Enough, you know what I mean? This kid's this.
Because
this
he's
kid's
17.
That.
Right.
Right. We'll throw him under the bus the same way we did this kid.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, who's to blame for the fact that you thought that and we could go through a long list of quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker liked Notre Dame. He had an offer. He liked Notre Dame. They didn't like him. Right. Well, I mean, they can't recruit those guys. Hendon Hooker could have gotten into Notre Dame. You chose not to recruit him.
Right.
I mean, do we need to go down a long list of college quarterbacks that you didn't think were good enough to recruit who are now ballers? You chose Tyler Buckner over J.J. McCarthy. I actually support that decision. right? You couldn't have known that he was going to miss his sophomore year and senior year and all that. That's an unknown. But like my point is, this is your choice.
Correct.
This is your choice. You're the reason you don't have the quarterbacks that you want. You made the choices of who you went after. You're the one that chose Drew Pine when he was a sophomore to come to Notre Dame, right? And now you're going to tell me he's not – see, like it's not like Drew Pine was a backup option because they missed on their top guy.
Correct.
They got him as a sophomore. And my frustration is after 2 pretty darn good games in a row, you're now ready to throw him under the bus, fans more so, but not – and Coach Freeman didn't throw him under the bus, but he was I thought I was puzzled why he was as harsh on his criticism with Drew. And everything he said about Drew today was fair. It was fair. I have no problem with it in itself. But when you're going to say that about him, but then go say the game plan and the play calling were fine, but you just got to execute better. Who are you talking about, Coach? Who are you talking about? I'm talking about Drew. So you're not willing to throw your 30-year-old millionaire coordinator under the bus, but you're going to throw proverbially throw your 20-year-old quarterback who's going to school for free under the bus and not getting paid to play football. All right, that just bothered me. And he didn't throw him under the bus per se. It's just that's what people say why you can't say anything critical of Tom Reese when you can't throw your – You were critical of Drew Pine, and I thought fair in your criticism because he wasn't harsh with it. Like I keep saying harsh criticism. The harshness came from he was critical. Like there was like, hey, man, you got to do better than this. It wasn't harsh in like a tone of unfairness. It wasn't like saying, well, he's got to snap the ball better in a hurricane. I'm not talking about that. What he said about Drew was correct. And if Drew's not mentally tough enough to handle that kind of criticism, then he can't be the quarterback in Notre Dame.
Right. And I think
I have full confidence. And I have full confidence Drew Pine is going to handle that well.
Right.
My problem is, why can't your offensive coordinator hear the same criticism?
Right. You
called your quarterback out for mistakes he made. Why aren't you calling your offensive coordinator out? You know what? Boy, that play we drew up to Tobias was a great play. You know what? We're going to have to start doing more of that stuff early in games to try to back teams off of our run game. That's not throwing them under the bus. That's sending a message, though. Okay, this is why that kid needed to play. This is what we got to do earlier. And those are the things that we're just not hearing and we need to hear, to be honest with you. And that's what was frustrating. Now, I hope and pray that at the end of the day, this is kind of what we joked about on Saturday night. This is just, buttering him up, telling him he's going to be a made man, come meet us at this house. And as soon as you walk in, it's, proverbially from a coaching standpoint.
Right, from a coaching standpoint.
But meaning like they are having that come to Jesus moment in his office.
Correct.
I hope that's actually happening.
Yes.
And so publicly I'm going to defend you to the hilt, because here's what you could do as a coach. I'm going to defend you because he could be saying, look, people are coming after Tommy. They've been coming after Tommy for a while. I'm going to defend him publicly.
Right.
But behind the scenes, hey man, what you're doing right now is not okay. How you're going about your business and practice, it's not okay. I've done a lot of reaching out to different sources over the last couple of weeks, Vince, and what we used to be critical of under Brian Kelly, I'm heard, is worse now. And that is they literally will not practice against a look that doesn't work for that play call. And then you wonder why when teams do things differently that their pass game struggles.
So what you're saying is the defenses that are set up by the offensive coordinator, the people setting up the game, not in the game plan, but in practice. So here's how it works in practice, right? The offensive coordinator puts a script together, what they want to go over in practice. They will give the defensive staff, this is how I want you to line up.
No.
That's what you're talking about?
It's their own, in college, it's their own GAs. So like when I was coaching as an offensive GA, I had to draw up the cards for the defense. So it's the GA. It's
they're giving it to the defense. This is how we
I
want
thought you meant
line
defensive staff. Yes.
No. They're giving the cards to the defense.
To the scout team defense.
Yes. This is how we want you to line up. And they're lining up in ways that the offense will be successful. You can't do that. You will
do it early in the week to gain rhythm because this is the look we think we're going to have. But as the week goes on, you start mixing up the looks a little bit. And I've shared the story when I was at Whitmer, where
just going to pull that up. Yep.
Coach Fincham was like, I just want you to throw, we're going to play Wabash. He's like, I just want you to just throw whatever you can think of at us.
Right.
And it got so bad that at one point in time, he had to say, he had to come out and say, Um,
Back off.
yeah, hey, look, man, just chill out a little bit, right? And after a while, it's like, this is what you got to do, man. This is what you got to do. And so, I mean, that's where we're at, Vince, is like, you got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to build on that. So the point is, coach has got to be able to sit down behind the scenes and say, hey, look, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to build. This is what we're going to do. This is who's going to play. I need more 15. I need more 16. Why? Because we don't have outside receivers that are getting a lot of separation vertically right now. Right. So what are we going to do? And we're going to put our big guys in there and go about it that way. And that's going to be the problem. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, yeah. Yep. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why everybody, we wanted to kind of look at this more big picture today than specific drawing up plays and things of that nature. And granted, the technology didn't agree with us today. Anyway, but we wanted to kind of everyone to understand kind of where we're coming from with the game plan talk, right? The play design talk and all of that. You can't just throw those terms out into the wind without explaining what we're talking about. So we wanted to make this was a perfect scenario. This is a perfect platform to talk about what specifically we are seeing and how it's not changing. And that's a massive problem from a big picture standpoint, not just a Stanford game standpoint, but from a big picture standpoint.
So Vince, let's get to some super chats here at the end.
Yes.
And then we're going to wrap this sucker up.
Sounds good.
So as we've said before, we really only respond to super chats on this. This is not a mailbag type of show, but when you are willing to give us super chats, we will obviously respond to those.
You betcha.
Mark Crowan says, why would Reese's game plan towards Stanford's strength and not change at half? Reese can't be clever for fourth quarter. If you see their weakness, why not change? Well, they did change a little bit to half. That's one of the things I thought they did do, and we were going to talk about this during the show, Mark, but I when we saw your super chat, I decided to hold on to it. They actually did a couple things at the halftime that were better. Like, for example, the play to Tobias Merriweather, we didn't see that in the first half, so that makes me think at halftime they said, hey, this is a look we think we can get to, because that was only their third drive of the second half. So they didn't have the ball a ton in the second half because the defense wasn't making stops, and we didn't spend a lot of time on the defense today, but it just, that's another.
And there were issues on the defense. Don't get us wrong, but you can't. You've got to be able to score more than 16 points.
Right. And so when you look at it and you say, okay, they started doing more motion with the slots. It wasn't a ton of adjustments, but they started doing more motion with the slots, which kind of got Stanford moving, which kind of opened up some of the run stuff, as opposed to just the early in the first half was just like Y motions and Y zips and stuff like that, which doesn't really influence the defense a ton. No. They started moving those guys a little bit more, which kind of influenced Stanford to kind of roll safeties or run guys across a little bit more. They did a couple little minor tweaks of the run game, which is again why they went on 2 scoring drives on 2 of their first 3 possessions of the half. So I do think they did some stuff at halftime. I don't think they waited for the fourth quarter because, I mean, their touchdown in the fourth quarter came on the first play of the fourth quarter. So it was a drive that started in the third quarter. I actually think they weren't clever in the fourth quarter. I think after that, they just kind of run. And
they were losing because
Stanford
went down and scored right after that.
Can't say it's not his fault. Audric Estimé fumbled. I'm like, well, kind of. Number one, coaches are responsible for teaching players, number one. And number two, you look at it and say, you're in a situation where one of the issues that we have with the offense is it's just there's no aggressiveness to it, right, Vince? And against North Carolina, you were able to rip off some bigger plays, not a ton, but you rip off some bigger plays because there was some creativity. Here in this game, you just kind of went about it. And what have we always said about the defense when they're playing good offenses? Limit the big play and make them go on long drives. Why? Right. Why do we say that, Vince? Why do we say?
Tires them out. Yeah, no,
well, but also the more plays you run, the more chance you're going to make a mistake.
Absolutely.
100%. So don't let them have the 60-yard touchdown. Make them go, because then the quarterback's going to miss. You're going to get a sack. They're going to fumble. You're going to get a tip ball.
And I'll tell you what, Stanford put the ball on the ground a lot on Saturday. More so than I remembered when I watched it the first time. They put the ball on the ground a lot. Notre Dame just didn't recover it. They did a good job of forcing the ball out. I will say that. They just didn't. None of them really went Notre Dame's way, unfortunately.
Yep. Okay, next super chat we have from Tyler Evans. I believe Tyler is one of the people I met at the game this weekend. He goes, I'm see here. I'm tired of Drew Pine forcing the ball to Michael Mayer when he was doubled, but was awesome to meet you, Brian, at the game. Oh, yes, he was. There, he said it right there. When you start reading these things before I read them out loud, it was great meeting you, Tyler. It was. He said, I'm Tyler Evans. I was like, hey, you've given up super chats before. But I get it too, but I also feel like the game plans are built around Michael Mayer being the primary read in a lot of instances. So, yeah, a young quarterback's going to focus on the primary read, who's also the best tight end in college football a little bit more. I did think his blocking was better in this game. He had a couple misses and then the one hold, but I thought overall he gave a lot better effort in the run game.
It's a rough
in this
hold,
particular
though.
game.
I mean, that was his hand
was
got
unnecessary.
outside the frame, which is why they called it a hold.
Yeah,
but it just wasn't a hold, man. That's tough.
But you just got to know when your hand gets there, you just got to.
Right. No,
you know,
100%.
it sucks, but it shouldn't have been a hold in my opinion. And it didn't influence the play. That's the other thing is a lot of referees will say, look, I'm not calling hold if it doesn't influence the play.
Right.
And it didn't influence the play.
Not this crew.
That guy wasn't getting off to Chris Tyree.
Right.
Dave Miller, super chat. Why can't Notre Dame recruit a high caliber quarterback? Sorry, Buckner and Pine nowhere close. Where is the gap in recruiting? Says who? Tyler Buckner was the consensus top 100 quarterback. Drew Pine was a top 100 quarterback by rivals. He was a top 200 quarterback by, on the consensus list. Gunnar Kiel was a top player. Deshaun Kaiser. Bama wanted Deshaun Kaiser. He was a 4-star kid. Malik Zaire was a highly ranked quarterback. Phil Dracovic was a top 100 quarterback. Why are we always assuming these kids can't play? Why do all these highly ranked kids? So one of two things is true. One, they're bad at evaluating quarterbacks. Or number two, they don't coach them well. And I'm sorry, I'm just going with the latter. I just am. So I'm just – and again, we're talking about playing Stanford, Dave. We're talking about playing Stanford.
Right, exactly.
They're terrible.
And you don't need a high-level quarterback to beat Stanford. I mean,
right. So Drew Pine can rip up North Carolina and beat BYU, but he can't beat Stanford, and it's because the quarterback's not talented.
Sorry.
Like, Dave, your overall point I'm with you on, because I have been critical of Tommy Rees's quarterback recruiting, much more so than the previous staff's quarterback recruiting. With the previous staff, it was development.
Right.
Why did Everett Golson regress? Because Everett Golson was incredibly talented. Why did Deshaun Kaiser regress? Why did Malik regress? Why did other players? Why did Ian Book regress? Right? Those are all criticisms that I've had. But it was never so much a talent issue. So anyway, that's kind of my thing there. Is I think it's a both thing. They got to coach these kids better. They got to do a better job of putting them in a position to be successful. And then, yes, continue to recruit higher level quarterbacks consistently, because some kids are not going to pan out and some kids are. But when you only recruit a big time quarterback once every 3 or 4 years, then it makes the margin for error a lot thinner. But again, a lot of it is choices, right? They chose not to recruit Hendon Hooker. They chose not to push for Cade Klubnik. I don't think they would have got Cade Klubnik anyway, but they made that choice. You chose not to recruit Drew Aller.
Yeah.
You chose not. There's a lot of kids they chose not to recruit. You made that choice. You chose to get commitments from Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine when they were freshmen and sophomores. Tyler was coming out of his freshman year. Drew was a sophomore. You guys made those choices. And then don't get mad at the players because they don't pan out or whatever. You chose them. They were your guy. So that is what it is. Benjamin Weiss, in your opinion, is your opinion book process the game most slow evolving now? No,
not even
because
close.
He did. But we also said during Book's tenure that they should have given him less to do.
Correct.
We did say that. Say that because he didn't process well. So we would criticize them for making him do full field reads. So no, my opinion has not evolved on that at all. I understand where Benjamin's coming from on that though, Vince, based on what we're saying in the show. I mean, I think it's a very fair question based on what we're talking, because we're criticized. But the difference is too is Ian Book's in his 4th career start. In 2018, when Chip Long turned the keys over to Ian Book, it was a very simple. It was a much more simplified pass. There was a lot of RPOs.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of quick stuff, a lot of one-on-ones.
Right.
He had the big mountains on the outside to just throw the ball up to. It was a much better game plan. And again, the first 2 weeks when things were simplified a lot of stuff to the tight ends, a lot of the backs, you're using different parts of your offense and being creative. And then all of a sudden, look, Drew Pine looks like a genius. Right. And then you try to go to this full field read and horizontal stretch, static routes, and all this other kind of stuff. And lo and behold, guys aren't getting open on that stuff. And this is why our kids aren't good enough. Okay, no, the coaching wasn't good enough either. Demetrius Rex with a super chat. It seems like Reese was forcing Pine into being a drop back quarterback like he did Buckner against Marshall. Well, Drew Pine is a drop back quarterback.
Yes.
What I meant by that, I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. What I meant by that is he was turning him into like a quarterback that was doing more like dropping back, like, like a pro style type of guy, as opposed to what I thought he did a great job of with Jack Cohn last year. When the offense finally got rolling, Vince, it was, I'm going to drop back and we're going to be quick. We're going to get the ball out. We're going to move. We're going to get guys running. We're going to cross. We're going to slide. We're going to slant. We're going to do this. And then we'll also do some stuff off of that, off play action. So then that set up the downfield stuff even better, because they would suck them up, not just with the run game, but then also with some of the quick stuff, and then set up the opportunities to get crossing routes, wheel routes. And this year we're just not seeing as much of that stuff. And so, like, honestly, you should be looking something close to, what we saw last year, So, yeah. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they adjust. Hopefully they learn from it. And they adjust.
They have to.
Yep. Andrew Burke with a super chat. Thank you, Andrew, very, very much. He says, we're halfway through the season. Where are your letter grades for every position coach, coordinators, and head coach? I'm not doing grades this year. I mean, it's just, I haven't done grades going into the games. I haven't done that this year. But I mean, Notre Dame's 3-3, so none of the grades are going to be very good.
That's okay. Exactly.
I mean, nobody is without blame, or I say blame, criticism. And I would hope that they would. Here's the thing. One of the things I respected about some of the past coaches that I knew pretty well, and I've shared stories about Chip Long, and I could share similar stories about Mike Denbrock and Tony Alford and Mike Elko and different guys that I've gotten to know a little bit, is when I would be critical of them from a football standpoint, they would engage with me.
Yeah.
And what I found with all of them was the only time they ever push back on me is if I got something wrong. So I'll share a story one time. I don't know if I've ever said who the coach was, but a defensive coach in Notre Dame. I wasn't ripping him, but I said, I was explaining why a play didn't work or why I thought. And I said, I think they're doing this here in coverage. And the coach hit me and was like, hey, just so you know, I listened to your show. I just want to explain to you, we were actually in this coverage on that play. And what was supposed to happen is this, and this. And he asked me not to say anything publicly per se, because he didn't want it to look like he was throwing the player under the bus. He says, I'm just letting you know this is what our coverage was on that play.
Right.
And I've joked about, other coaches like, hey, look, man, like I didn't do a good job today. Like, I could never say anything about those coaches that was harsher than what they were saying about themselves.
Correct.
Because that's what great people, that's why I never liked Brian Kelly. He just wanted you to praise him all the time. Like, he should have been the one pissed off about his record against top 10 teams, not me.
Right.
Because that's his job. And that's what I liked about a lot of those coaches in the past. Whereas now it's like you're critical of somebody and like they're not going to talk to you again, and it's just like, or they get mad, or, they sick people on you, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, dude, you should be more pissed about this than I am, and so, these that's just kind of the way I look at it. Let manager one. I miss the offseason. Those were good times. Great job as always, guys. Yeah. Back when hope was alive.
Yeah. When you had hope.
But look, here's their deal, though.
Funny, though.
This team has an opportunity, if they can get things right, to still beat a lot. I had a buddy of mine call me tonight, a coach and friend of mine. He was like, man, they're going to lose a bunch of games. I was like, the thing is, they can beat every team left on their schedule if they would just get their heads out of their behinds.
Yes.
Maybe they might need to catch a break or two against a couple of those teams. Sure. But I mean, if they can play with Ohio State for 4 quarters, they can play with anybody else left on their schedule.
Absolutely.
Right. And if they can whip North Carolina, then they can play with anybody left on their schedule for the most part. You know what I mean? But they're going to have to make the changes. I hope they do, because if they can finally build some momentum, and that's what was so disappointing about this loss, is you had a chance to really build some momentum. Absolutely. 4th win in a row and do all that kind of stuff, and you lost it. And it's just, and there's just no excuse for it. And anyone that wants to make an excuse for it is just not someone I want to have a conversation with. So, yeah, that's it. Not where I'm at. So Vince, that's going to do it for the Super. Actually, we just had one more pop up.
Yep.
Craig Sebring said, if we finish 6-6 or 7-5, do we go to a bowl game, or should we say no to any bowl games? And absolutely should play in bowl games.
Yeah.
Look,
why not?
The only time you should ever say no to a bowl game is if you're going through a coaching change. It's the only time.
Right.
It's an opportunity for you to get more work with your players, which any coach worth his grain of salt should want. There's going to be players, like if they go 7-5 and go to a bowl game, Michael Mayer won't play in the bowl game, nor should Michael Mayer play in the bowl game,
Right.
nor should Isaiah Foskey play in the bowl game, or anybody else is going pro.
Jarrett
Patterson should play in the
Patterson.
bowl game.
Right.
And I'm fine with that, right? I mean, I don't like it, but I accept it and I understand it, and
And
that's
I get
the world we live in, and I'm not going to hammer them for it.
I used to hammer kids. I used to hammer the concept, but now
I still hate the concept. I still hate the concept.
I hate it, but
I'm not mad at the kids anymore. That's the
Right.
culture that they are in. That's the environment they're in, where that's what's the best thing for them. But because of the one thing, the NCAA's done a couple nice things. The one thing I've said they did was the four game redshirt rule.
Yeah,
because now you can play freshmen and kids who maybe haven't played 4 games yet in a bowl game and save their year of eligibility, but you get 15 practices and you get to go somewhere remotely. Usually it's at a city where there's going to be something fun to do.
Correct.
And your kids get to kind of have that last experience together as a team, where that team will never be together again.
Ever.
So I would be disgusted if Notre Dame turned down a bowl, unless the players, actually I'd still be, if the players said, no, we don't want another bowl game, I'd say you got a huge problem with that football team. Yep. You got to start over from scratch and get yourself a new roster. And you just tell kids, hey, we're going to go portal and freshman next year.
Yeah, right.
So if you voted not to play,
bye.
Go play somewhere else.
Yep,
I don't know if you can do that or not, but that's what I would do.
Well, you can.
And
Shoot.
so
look what happened at USC. They turned over like half their roster.
Right.
You can do it.
Well, Notre Dame can't do it quite like that, but you get the point that I make.
Yes.
It tells me you've got a culture problem, and I'd be shocked if that were the case. I think there's a lot of kids that would want to play in a bowl game, should want to play in a bowl game, and coaches should definitely want to play in a bowl game because it's a great building opportunity for next year.
Correct.
That's the only time I'm ever comfortable with playing for next year is in a bowl game where it's not a major bowl game.
Yeah.
Where, yeah. Well, what did you say? Crappy bowl game?
No. I said bowl prep and a lower bowl game.
Yes, lower bowl game. Correct. If it's a Fiesta Bowl, you're trying to win it. You know what I mean? If it's the Gator Bowl against Florida, you're trying to win it. If it's the Cheez-It Bowl against Iowa State, I mean, you're always blessed to play.
You're always trying to win it.
You try to win it, but I'm going to try to win it with some dudes that I'm going to have on my team next year.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, that's just, and I'm not saying if Jarrett Patterson wants to play in that game, you don't say, sorry, Jarrett, we're going to start so-and-so.
No, right.
No. You know what I mean? But hey, maybe I'm going to give my my freshman receiver a couple more snaps, or my, like, let's just say hypothetically, Jadarian Price was healthy by the bowl game. I'd probably play him a little bit just to get him a little bit of playing time, just hypothetically speaking. Now he won't be. I'm just, he was just kind of the first.
That was just an example. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's it for that. So that's going to do it for today's Brian's favorite, the Mayo Bowl. No, my favorite bowl game name-wise 10-day is the Cheez-It Bowl because I love Cheez-Its. And I just think it'd be cool to kind of go cover that game and just get all the Cheez-It swag.
Everybody just,
you know what I mean?
Cheez-Its, like that'd be awesome.
Like I have this dream of going to the Cheez-It Bowl, and I walk into the media hotel and I go into my room and there's just like bags of Cheez-Its or boxes of Cheez-Its all over the place. Like that's the dream 10-day. That's the dream. So that's why it's the Cheez-It Bowl that would be my pick over all the others.
I had high hopes for the media gift last year at the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl.
Oh yeah.
And, I was severely let down.
Now the players got PlayStations.
Yeah, well, I got a portable charger.
such an ingrate. All right, so like 10 days said, everybody smash that like button on your way out. Also hit that subscribe to the channel, share this podcast, hit the notification bell, sign up for the message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. I had somebody just texted me to cancel their subscription because I was mean to the Golics. So yeah, it's your boy too, Vince. So we need somebody to sign up so I can get that one back. So, I guess I was mean to the Golics. I thought I was pretty respectful to the Golics, to be honest with you. But it is what it is. So anyway, Vince, good show today. I wish we would have been able to have the charts up and talk it over, but StreamYard is a fickle mistress, Vince. It's a very fickle mistress.
I like
so that. Sometimes he just doesn't want to have it. Somebody said the Mountain Dew Bowl presented by Irish Breakdown. If we had the money, I would do that. I would so do that. I am actually, Vince, in the process of trying to quit Mountain Dew. So if I snap at you a couple times in phone conversations, just understand why. I'm trying to wean off of Mountain Dew.
I don't know if I'm on board with that decision. I'm just going to put it out.
No, I mean, it's it's a little, I got to do it. I got to get healthy. So it is what it is, man. So anyway, That's going to do it, everybody. We will be back tomorrow. Ryan and I think Ryan and I, could be me and Sean are going to do a show this week probably, but we'll be back next week. And by the way, I like the Golics. I thought I was respectful to them today. So I was kind of floored when somebody was like, cancel my subscription because you were disrespected the Golics. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, whatever you say. Like I thought I was pretty respectful to them, but it is what it is. But just want to make sure that people don't think that I have an issue with the Golics, because I do not. I don't know them personally, and I've never had an issue with them. So anyway, so it is what it is. Can't make everybody happy, right, Vince?
Right, no doubt.
So yes, we'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna talk more about Notre Dame, where Notre Dame is at the midway point of the season. It's gonna be our focus this week. I honestly have zero desire to do 4 straight shows on UNLV. I just because this game's not about UNLV. Just like last week wasn't about Stanford. This is about Notre Dame. So we're gonna have a lot to say about those type of things as we move forward. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, Vince. That's for sure. And then, of course, Vince and Sean will be together for one more day this week. And then Jesse and Sean will have 2 night shows. So we're going to have some fun this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have one of Notre Dame's commits is going to join us for Ryan's going to interview him, and we'll play that at some point in time this week and all those other type of things. So we're going to have some fun this week. So make sure you are with us. But the way you know it is subscribe, right? You got to hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. So for Vince, I'm Brian. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.